When it comes to talking about things on the show, there are problems I sometimes run into. Media crosses over, so occasionally talking about a video game will often have me mention an anime that it got turned into, or in the case of the episode we did last time, a cartoon that got turned into a movie. Because of this, it's hard to escape certain subjects. So while I apologize ahead of time for this being the third instance that Final Fantasy has been able to worm its way into the show in such a short amount of time, I felt that there were a few things better to start off a month of horror and fear than with a movie that nearly destroyed Squaresoft as a whole, The Spirits Within. But not for the reasons you think. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. Before we get into the details about this movie proper, I want everyone to welcome back Kitty, who, as you might recall, was the one who just had to come in for our top 10 list because, well, I was talking about Ghostbusters.
It's my favorite.
And when she heard the fact that I was wanting to talk about this movie a bit, she was interested in tagging along. So she's here to provide backup, especially since she's a bit more familiar with the actors and a few history points involving the movie.
I'm sure you'd be able to cover it well enough, hun, but this gives me an excuse to be on here and nerd out a little, especially considering this film and, well, its history.
Well, since you're the one who brought it up, why not talk about it before we get into the film itself?
Sure thing. Coming out back in 2001, Spirits Within was advertised as the first CGI film done in a photorealistic style. This was at a time when other movies like Shrek, Monsters Inc., and Jimmy Neutron focused on either unusual shapes or inhuman characters in order to make up for the uncanny valley that was still kind of a thing with CGI productions back then. And for its time, it's something that I think still holds up pretty well today, with only the occasional character movement or facial feature that really breaks the illusion.
While generally enjoyed by critics, this film was actually a box office failure, one of the biggest ones for animated movie history, and is actually still among the top 5 last I checked. It's because of this that not only did Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, left the company, but it's also the reason for Square delaying its eventual merger with Enix, and outright killed the film company, Square Productions, that had the lofty goal of wanting to bring games and movies closer together and improve each other.
So, I can understand the whole horror and fear spiel at the start, considering what happened to Square thanks to the movie bombing so big. But what were you going on about that not being the reason we're talking about it today?
Well, let me put it this way. I think even a person unfamiliar with this movie could tell at a glance that it has nothing to do with Final Fantasy. We can agree that, had they not plastered the game's title onto it, this probably would have done much better in theaters, yeah?
Yeah, and?
What I'm saying is that's not the only thing that was done wrong with it. The movie was advertised to folks as a sci-fi film, when it's actually more of a horror movie.
What? Come again?
Let me take you step by step for a moment to explain things to you and everyone else watching, my thought process on this. So, let's start at the beginning. What's the setting of the film?
Post-apocalyptic Earth. But that's not enough for a horror film, hon.
True, it's not. But let's start adding different aspects of the film into the mix. What about the antagonists?
The Phantoms or the General played by James Woods?
While I absolutely love the fact that Hades is in this film, and I didn't remember it until rewatching it, we're talking about the Phantoms here.
Well, alien life forms that were killed when their planet blew up. They were ghosts when a piece of their planet landed on Earth, thus Phantoms. I get that might seem to be a bit scary, but...
Alright then. Now add in the dark and claustrophobic feeling of the movie, where there's rarely a time where the characters aren't running for their lives from the Phantoms.
I think I see where you could argue towards it being horror, yeah. Though I'm guessing you've got more that you think pushes the movie into it.
Of course. It's actually the biggest event in the entire movie. It's when that James Wood character you talked about shuts down the barrier for the city, which is the only thing keeping them safe from the Phantoms. He plans only for a small amount to get in, wanting to use that as proof that his option for firing his Zeus cannon weapon is the right option in moving forward for fighting the Phantoms, right?
Right, but that leads to... Oh. Oh.
Yep. The next couple of scenes we see of the film is pretty much everyone in the barrier city running for their lives, only for their souls to be snatched away from their bodies by the Phantoms.
And then we start losing the cast one by one as they are slowly killed off by the Phantoms rising up out of the ground, glowing with an otherworldly energy. We even have a part where one of the crew willingly stays behind when he's injured, knowing he'll only slow everyone down and wants to give them a chance to escape.
Exactly. It's got a lot of the classical aspects of a horror film to it. The big-time monsters that we don't properly understand or even are able to deal with for most of the film. Almost none of the main cast is alive when all is said and done, not to mention the death of countless others. And while we do see a hopeful ending to everything, the simple fact of the matter is that it is not a feel-good movie. It's dark, depressing, and the implications of having your soul pretty much eaten by the Phantoms is downright terrifying.
And these make sense for someone who knows about the development of Final Fantasy VII. Sakaguchi wanted to have a story that had the elements of the game to show that just because someone died didn't mean they were gone. It's what developed into the life stream we actually see later on, as well as the views of the game in general.
Yeah, we see this in how the movie turned out as well, considering Sakaguchi wrote the original script. From what I've been able to piece together, both the game and this movie were given this theme because his mother had passed away thanks to a fire that took both her and his family home. The main character of Spirits Within is even named after her, Aki.
Jeez, that I didn't know.
Pretty heavy stuff, I must admit. So, overall though, final thoughts about my idea of this being a horror film?
I have to admit, I never really looked at it in that light before, but I have to agree that it makes sense. Taken as a horror film and watching it as such, like something akin to the Aliens franchise and the like, they share a lot of similarities. Otherworldly, dark, depressing, claustrophobic, and almost hopeless at times. Considering the film's origins and its attempted tie-in to the Final Fantasy name, I never even considered thinking of it that way. And I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in that.
Exactly my point. There's no denying that this movie has Final Fantasy DNA in it, what with some of the themes of Gaia, as well as some of the character traits. But without the length and dedication that a game requires, a lot of it can simply just fall flat, which I think is the major problem the movie has in a nutshell. It's a video game developer trying to go straight into the deep end to make a big sci-fi movie, when that market had already been dominated by things like The Matrix. Had it instead leaned a little bit more into those elements that can code it into a horror film, as well as gone without the game title, I feel like this would have gone over a much better.
So, now that we've gone through that, what are you going to talk about next week? With your rotation, it's a video game topic next time, right? What horror game are you going to talk about? Resident Evil? Dead Space?
Actually, we're going to be talking about something a little bit more monochromatic.
Yeah, okay. Not touching that one. Have fun!